Good.
Darren David Lawrence Gold of Westcliff-on-Sea. Now, for the purpose of this interview, to save time, I'm going to call you just David. I hope that's all right. David, you are one of the most regular attenders at Western Marble Arch Synagogue. Each and every Shabbat you are there in your place on the front row, surrounded by members of your family, two of whom are on the board and two smaller grandchildren who cause a lot of amusement to us as they attempt to reach the Torah by climbing up the steps there. Where did you come from? I mean, was your family always involved in Jewish affairs and Jewish matters? What sort of Jew were you brought up as?
I was brought up as a sort of regular Church of England Orthodox Jew, if that makes sense. We were of an Orthodox family. We kept kosher. My grandfather on my mother's side, when I was very young, used to take me to shul every Shabbat. And there I would meet my other grandfather. And that became a regular thing. There was a time in my teens when I didn't go. But when I got to university age, I started going. I was at the LSE, as you know. And so I lived in London. And I used to visit the London synagogues, and I've kept on going. And when my children were very, very young, I used to take them. I used to run the children's service in Westcliff. And eventually I got involved in synagogue politics there. It's become just the norm.
But you clearly can do a haftarah, a maftir perfectly.
Well,
what was your Jewish education? How were you educated?
I was thinking about that. Maybe it's all different nowadays, but when I was taught by a very well-known, very well-respected cousin in Southend, a man called Reverend Garberts, who was the father of Bernard Garberts, Machatonim to Rabbi Shepson, who was the community leader in those days. We were taught the notes. We were taught to be able to read any Haftorah, and that's what I've been able to do. And so you're absolutely right, I can do that. My Hebrew is not so good, but I know the notes. And my voice isn't much good either, but there you go. Doesn't matter, everyone leaves the synagogue to drink alcohol when I go on the Bimah. I think that's a reflection on my ability, actually.
Well, they come back with a smile on their face.
Yes.
I mean, you established yourself in one of your early speeches in the House of Lords, because you started by saying, I'm an observant Jew who only eats kosher meat. Now, not even the former chief rabbi started his first speech by putting forward his CV in that manner.
I suspect that was in a debate on Shechita when we were truly worried that there may be a move to make it illegal. Indeed,
it was in that speech. I'll deal with some of your other speeches in a moment or two, but let's just go back. You were president of Westcliff-upon-Sea Shul for a period of 9 years.
9 years.
Well, was that a turbulent time for you? How did you compare conducting a shul meeting with the House of Lords and with litigation?
The litigation background was really helpful to shul politics. And being president of the shul made it very much easier for me when I became senior partner of Herbert Smith. There was no issue with which I was ever faced as partner of a large city law firm that I hadn't had to deal with as president of the community, where every single member felt they should be running the place. But of course, none wanted to.
You mentioned that after school, you were at a private grammar school, Westcliff School for Boys, described recently by Ofsted as outstanding, and I'm sure when you were there it was similarly so. You then went to LSE, the London School of Economics. Now, in the late 60s, early 70s, that was a hotbed of socialism. Would you agree?
Yes. It goes back to its foundation by the Webbs. It's always been an organ of the left. It has been a tremendous academic institution, but if you had to choose its politics, it's on the left of centre. And in the late 60s, there was a major problem. I think it was in 1968. The director there was a South African man called Adams. And the whole thing eventually turned into revolution, and the school was closed down. There were barricades in Houghton Street. This was all the year before I went there.
Yes. Was law your first choice, or did you give thought to some other occupation, profession, or way of spending your life?
I chose law because it was of interest to me, but primarily I had in mind going into business of some kind, but I had no background in business. I had this, what seems now a silly thought, which was that if I become a qualified professional, and then I branch out to undertake some sort of business career, if it failed, I could always put up my brass plate and practice. So that was the sort of thought process I had.
You know, that's precisely one of the questions which somebody has sent in. They asked, do you consider becoming qualified as a solicitor a good stepping stone towards some other way of earning your living?
I think actually it has the opposite effect. It certainly did for me. Spending some years learning the law, becoming a litigator, made me extremely cautious. And so then branching out, doing something that had risk attached to it, became anathema. So I enjoyed being a litigator. I thought Herbert Smith was a wonderful place in those days. And it was very easy for me to just carry on. And although I was there 38 years, which is a colossal time. And people don't stay in one job for that period. But actually, it wasn't one job. Every case was different. Each time I had new work to do, it was a new experience. I learned about new industries. And therefore, I had a new challenge every time.
Well, I can agree with you that when you say Herbert Smith is a wonderful place, for personal reasons, I believe it's a wonderful place, because before I met you, before I knew you, I had cause to choose a firm of solicitors. I wanted a good litigation firm. And it was because of reputation in litigation and knowledge of your name in it that I chose the firm. The firm, you go up these stairs like a stairway to heaven, and you come into this Americanized Manhattan type office with lots and lots of staff around, running around. Tell me this, let's first of all go through your record there. You were articled there, is that right?
I was.
And you stayed on, you became a solicitor there. That was in 1975. You became a partner in 1983, head of litigation in 2003, and you became the senior partner in 2005 until you left in about 2010 or 12. Litigator, you were a litigator. Many people think of a litigator as a Rottweiler, but not you. I think you're more a Springer Spaniel, sniffing around and finding the details and looking after the minor points which become important. Would you agree?
I'm not sure that I am actually that good at those minor points. My particular style was to look at the big picture. I would look to what we were there to achieve, what the particular issue was, and then I would try and devise a way of getting that result, which may have involved litigation, but might not have done. Yes. There are too many lawyers who are instructed, they find themselves with what they think is a good case, they ramp up, they get very excited, and they lose sight of the commercial reality. They don't ever stop to ask themselves, is this the way to achieve the result? And I think that was a differentiator for me.
Yes, you reflect my experience, actually, because I said before, there were people, lots and lots of people running around there. One is given a team, not just one lawyer generally, but we had a team. It was nothing to do with my profession or anything like that. It was a company matter. and I received first-class service, even down to the sandwiches which were selected for the very, very lengthy meetings we had. And talking of lengthy meetings, litigation is expensive. It involves hourly billing. Now, what's your feeling about hourly billing? Is that something which really racks up the cost of litigation, or is there a way of avoiding that?
When I started, there was no timekeeping. That happened some years in. So in those good old days, there was no such thing as interim billing. One got to the end of whatever it is one was doing and weighed up the result and thought about what was a fair figure and charged accordingly. I think probably the idea for hourly billing came from the United States, as so many things do. And there is a risk of abuse. You touched on it without saying that it was abused a few moments ago. The way in which things go wrong is when the law firm starts putting bodies on a matter. So it isn't just a partner, a senior associate, it's a coterie of others, down to the person who charges you an hourly rate for bringing in those sandwiches that you enjoyed. That's when it becomes inappropriate and is abused. I think that it requires proper attention by the law firm, and the client has to be vigilant. If it's done in the right way, it can be fair.
I remember once chatting with you over Kiddish in Shul, and we were talking about litigation, and the phrase which you used struck me as being particularly pertinent was the talent of a litigator is to avoid litigation, to endeavour to bring the parties together to come to some sensible solution. That has been your theory throughout, has it not?
Yes, and remains so, because although I no longer litigate, I still get involved in disputes. And my whole purpose is to see if I can find a solution as efficiently and cheaply as possible.
But before we go on to anything further, perhaps a word or two about some of the rather enormous cases, the famous companies for whom you acted. You received a lot of publicity for your involvement with BEA systems. I think you were appointed by the American Ministry of Justice to look into that company. There was Rolls-Royce, Serco, various other. Corruption and compliance, I think, were matters which you were instructed to look into. Is that right?
Yes. I was appointed as monitor for BAE Systems by the Justice Department. They had entered into the equivalent of a plea bargain in the States. And part of the deal was that they had to have someone look over them for the next few years. It was a 3-year appointment, bluntly, to make sure that they remained compliant and honest. So a lot of the work had been done before I came on the scene. But that was the role I took on. It was not something I had looked for. I was approached to do it. I didn't actually know what a monitor was before I took on this role.
You were also involved in politics. Was this at the time that you were in practice, or had you been involved in politics before as an antidote to what you saw at the LSE, for example?
No, I'd never been involved in politics, and it all came about rather accidentally. I was approached by a very close confidant of David Cameron. It was, it must have been around 2005, because it was at the time the Conservative Party was looking for a new leader. And the front runner in those days was David Davis, still a very active politician. And I was not terribly impressed by Davis. I felt that he was not someone who would gain support in the country. And what the Conservative Party needed was a Tony Blair-style leader. And I had seen a little of Cameron, and I thought that he met that picture very well. So when I was approached, I said, yes, I will help. And the reason I was approached was that there was a bright young team around David, and it was felt that there would be issues where they would need wise guidance from someone who had good judgment, which I was perceived to have. And so I said, yes, immediately. I'm very happy to do that.
Was it not during the time of David Cameron that you asked you were asked to head an inquiry into political donations to the Conservative Party.
Yes,
in 2012.
well, I did a couple of things. The first thing was that when he was leader, still in opposition, there was a scandal over expenses for members of parliament. And he set up a scrutiny committee, and they asked me if I would be part of that, which I did. And we then meticulously examined every Conservative member's expenses. If I can remind you, there were issues over moats and duck ponds, I think, or duck houses. And we went through the whole lot. In appropriate cases, we requested repayment of monies. In some cases, we encouraged members not to stand at the next election. That was the first thing. And then when David became Prime Minister, they asked me if I would chair the Disciplinary Committee. And doing that, I undertook one or two inquiries. One was into the behaviour of someone who'd been treasurer of the party.
And
incidentally, a gentleman who is rumoured to be appointed into the House of Lords in the next few weeks, which is quite interesting.
Yes. You were asked, I think, to conduct a few inquiries, but you were also asked to become counsel to the Conservative Party and also to chair their disciplinary committee.
Yes, I did that, and I held several. We rewrote the rules.
Yeah.
And as chair, I again conducted one or two inquiries when there were problems.
Somebody sent a question for me to put to you along these lines. If you were still chair of the Conservative Disciplinary Committee, what advice would you have given Dominic Cummings in the recent weeks?
Would I have given him or the party?
Him. If he'd asked, can I go up to Durham for various reasons that he gave afterwards, if he'd given those reasons at the time, what would you have said to him?
I think that he can just about justify the trip up to Durham because of the problem he had with the child. I think the trip to test out his eyesight by driving 30 miles is on the wrong side of the line.
Yes.
I think that we're in a very difficult position at the moment. For reasons I cannot explain, I'm not close to the centre. I don't know the present Prime Minister. I've never had dealings with him. But I think the present government is very dependent on the advice and skills of Dominic Cummings. He's obviously a very clever fellow, and they've been desperate not to let him go. I think that probably, if you leave that to one side, the decisions he made were wrong and he should have gone.
The question of the number of people in the House of Lords is also something which one or two individuals have mentioned to me. There are, for example, the number of people in the House of Lords is only second to the number of people in the People's Assembly of China. It's one of the largest assemblies. Do you think too many people are being packed in there? That's my first point. My second point is, do you think they should be restricted to those like you, and shall we say another friend of mine, Leslie Turnberg, former president of the Royal College of Physicians, who have specialised knowledge and therefore have something to impart to the House, rather than those who have given large sums of money?
Let me pick up your last point first. I don't think people should be given a place in the House of Lords simply because they pay money. But that is not to say that some that do and have found themselves there for that reason haven't made a magnificent contribution. I think you have to judge each individual on what they do. Now, as to the size of the House, I'm not sure exactly how many there are right now, because as a result of the very senior age of a great number of people, we tend to have a bereavement every week or so. So the numbers slowly decline. But it's in the order of over 800 or something near that. However, the number of people who are actually active is far lower than that. When we've had the most controversial of debates, and votes. For example, same-sex marriage comes to mind, the Brexit debate, where we're under a 3-line whip to be there. The most that have ever walked through the voting lobbies is about 550. So it's smaller in terms of active people than the House of Commons. The number of people who are there on a regular basis, when we haven't got these very important votes, is much lower than that. As to the cost of it, one doesn't receive anything unless one is there. So you have to physically be there and you have to claim. And otherwise, the fact that there is just a number doesn't add anything to the cost beyond one thing, which is issuing the papers in terms of a writ of summons every time there is a new parliament to come along. I don't know how much that involves.
But there were quite a few people, Bernard, who were appointed a few years ago as a sort of payola to the support given to the Conservatives by the Liberal Democrats. And quite a few people who hadn't made much progress in the House of Commons and who lost their seats were put into the House of Lords. That is the sort of thing which rather neutralises the effect of the place. Would you not agree?
Well, you are absolutely right. There is a lot of criticism. It doesn't surprise me at all that that question has been raised with you. The reason is, of course, that we have no retirement provision. So it's up to members when they want to stop. Some go early, a great number do not, and they hang on. There is a general view that the Liberal Democrat Party is overrepresented in the House of Lords. But I don't knock it at all. I think it's a wonderful institution, and I leave myself out of this. I'm talking about others. One of the things introduced by Tony Blair when he was Prime Minister was a very tight time regime in the Commons on debates. So the number of matters that go through the House of Commons that are fully debated are actually very few indeed. And more particularly, when a ruling party has a big working majority, like right now with the Conservative Party, where we have an 80-seat majority, the ruling party is able to get through any legislation it wants. What the House of Lords does is it truly and fully scrutinises every single measure that comes from the Commons. There is no time limit on debate, and a lot of votes go through at the committee stage, where we send matters back to the House of Commons and say, you must think this through. Now, although under the Parliament Act, the Commons can always get its way, on a lot of occasions, there has been some rethinking, and the provision has been amended to reflect comments that have come out of the House of Lords.
I'm in no way denigrating the work of the House of Lords. Indeed, I'm a fan of the parliamentary channel on BBC and find myself watching the debates in the House of Lords more often than watching the Commons. And the quality of debate and the quality of language used is indeed much greater. But you've touched on a point as to the longevity of tenancy. Should they really be life peers, or should they be for a period of time? And I say that a little from personal experience, in that when I was in Gibraltar for 2 years and 3 months, I was a lord. I was called my lord or your lordship and all that sort of thing. And then when I finished there, came back to life again. Do you think that there should be a time limit on the period, and that the older ones should perhaps be, if not encouraged to retire, compelled to retire?
I have heard really very elderly members of the House of Lords come into the House, often aided by others or with Zimmer frames or something. There was one member who unfortunately passed away, who had to come in with an oxygen tank, and you wouldn't think he could make any contribution at all. But some of these elderly people have spoken so brilliantly, they are so on top of their subject, that I think just to say there is an upper age limit, everyone above that age should go, is a mistake. I think we should encourage more retirement, but mostly of those people who make no contribution.
Well, I'm personally very, very glad to hear you say that about age. Can I therefore pass from Herbies and House of Lords to the present day? How you not seen finding yourself busier than ever now, because what you have taken on behalf not only of other companies, but also on behalf of the Conservative Party, which involves, as I understand it, examining in detail all agreements made with the European Union, that you have an awful lot on your plate at the moment.
Yes, that latest thing is very new. I've joined a committee looking at all international treaties that from now we will enter into. It's being chaired by Lord Goldsmith, who was the Labour Attorney General. And we are having, I think, our 4th meeting tomorrow. We will start our really active work because at the moment we're finding our feet and deciding on the way we'll operate. But the first international treaty that the government is negotiating is with the United States. The second, and we anticipate this will go more slowly, is with Japan. And we will scrutinise it. And this is going to be a very big piece of work. The papers that I've been receiving just for these preliminary meetings are in the order of around 100 pages each. And it's very detailed stuff, a lot of submissions and learned opinions from lawyers around the world, not just in the UK. It's going to be very interesting, but it will be quite a chore.
David, thank you very much indeed. You make it quite clear that all that glistens is clearly gold. You have a very busy life, and I hope that that busy life will not prevent you continuing your regular attendance at Western Marble Arch, where you are one of our foremost members and one of our foremost families. Thank you, David.
Well, it's very kind of you to say that. I'm very much looking forward to going back. I can't wait for them to lift the veil so we can again march in on a Saturday morning, even if we have to keep our faces covered. But when that will be, I do not know.
The possibility of going to a kiddish with our faces covered enchants me. Thank you, David.
Maybe straws will be issued to everyone. Thanks very much, Barry.